Hey, everybody. I know that you all have been hearing from us and getting our emails and asking you to take action around something called the SAVE Act. And so the SAVE Act right now is in the Senate. I wanted to take just a minute to talk a little bit more about it for folks who haven't had a chance to look it up or do their research. And I thought I'd bring on one of our nation's foremost voting rights and civil rights attorneys, my good friend, all of our good friend, really, Judith Browne Dianis, to help us
Mhm.
break this down and understand not only what is in the bill and why it's problematic, but also the implications for this year and beyond, as well as looking at and talking about, I think, Judith, part of the challenges, we see these things in isolation, the SAVE Act here, the
Mhm.
raiding of the Fulton County Board of Elections there, the subpoenaing of the,
Yeah.
Arizona 2020 elections over here. They seem isolated, but they're not. And so I want to also, if we can, try and tie these things together. But let's start first with what is the Save America Act and exactly what is it
Mhm.
supposed to be saving America from?
So it is technically called the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. And it really should be like called the Suppressing American Votes and Voter Eligibility Act. So what this does is that it requires proof of citizenship in order to register to vote. And what people really need to know about it is that this is straight up voter suppression. This is a bill that would make it harder for people to vote. What we want in this country are free, fair, and accessible elections. It ain't gonna be free under this act because you're gonna have to pay for a passport, birth
Right.
certificate. It's not gonna be fair because it's gonna hit Black people and women, especially married women and trans people, disproportionately.
Right.
And it's not gonna be accessible because it's just anything that adds more barriers and makes it harder to vote means that there are a lot of people who will just give up and say forget it. And so this is intentional. They're trying to say that it's about non-citizens voting,
Right.
but that's not happening, right?
Anyway.
This has been an ongoing conversation. So it doesn't just start now in this moment, but this dates back to the first Black elected president.
Right.
That's when they started this crap about
Well,
voter
there's
fraud.
there's so much that really just dates back to the first Black president
And they
in
still
American
upset.
history that people have been struggling against ever since he got
They
elected. And
still trying to fix it.
right, right. So let's talk a little bit about the when you're saying that this will affect Black people, it will affect women, it will affect trans folks. Why is that? So we know that it's calling for some specific things, right? It is saying that you have to provide proof of citizenship in order to register. It's also saying that there will be a national voter ID in order to be able to cast
Mhm.
your ballot. Why will that disproportionately impact our communities?
Well, people will be able to use their passports, but passports are a luxury, right? They're about if you are going out of the country, then you get a passport and you have to pay for it, right?
Right.
The same with birth certificates. People don't have access to their birth certificates. So what it would require you to do is go apply for those documents, pay for those documents, poll tax, right?
Yes.
In order to be able to vote. For women, if you have changed your last name, then your birth certificate and your name on your driver's license is not the same, right? Like I'm Judith Browne Dianis, but my birth certificate does not say that other name, right? And it's one of the reasons why I didn't want to change my name for a long time because I
Right.
knew that there is like an administrative cost to me to
Right.
change my name. And so for women that trans people, if you're born with one name and you have gone through transition and you have a new name, it just they're not matching, the documents aren't matching, so
Right.
disproportionately it hits us because we have lower income families disproportionately who can't afford the documents, right? We are disproportionately not don't even have those documents on us because we're not traveling, etc., and
Mhm.
using passports. And
Mhm.
so this is the thing is that we need to know that when they come up with these laws, what one court said is they're doing it with surgical precision.
Right.
They know exactly who they are hitting and who it will make voting harder for.
Right. Yeah. It is striking to me, this sort of, because what is the problem that they're solving for? I think is the point that you were making in the beginning.
Right.
Like this kind of voter fraud is statistically non-existent in the
Yeah.
country. It is about surgically going after particular communities, particular constituencies, and making it harder for them to vote. And all of the things that you just went through, Americans who don't have passports, people don't. Why? I mean, there's an assumption, right? Traveling out of the country is, as you said, a luxury. Everyone doesn't have that. You have to get a passport. You have to get access to a birth certificate. You have to pay for documents that effectively is a poll tax.
Right.
And
Right.
I know that we're supposed to be erasing American history and everything, but I think that we already paid for with the
Right.
blood of Black
That's right.
people, the
That's right.
elimination of barriers
Right.
to voting, like the poll
Right.
tax. And so
Right.
we should not be putting, this shouldn't be going back in front of Americans, particularly when Americans are paying
Right.
more for everything right now.
Right.
You're
Right.
asking people in this year that, because this would take effect immediately.
That's right.
Even if we're
Immediately. That's right. Because this is the thing is that they're not not like, oh, we're gonna fix this problem over time. They're like, no, immediately,
right.
because the midterms are coming, right? And folks need to also understand that the real ID is not necessarily going to fix the problem, because in some states you actually don't have to be a citizen in order to get a real ID. So that's not even going to fix the problem, right? And there's other provisions in it that are not being talked about. Like,
Yeah.
this bill makes it harder to get on the rolls, but easier for them to take you off, right? And
Yeah, will
so
you talk
they
about that for a second? Because I think that the voter purge piece is particularly, it's sort of maybe buried in there. I don't know. I haven't, dug deep in it. It
Yeah.
feels like it's buried in there.
Right.
But it is like, for the federal government to decide that they have the authority to purge voters off of state voter rolls is a big deal.
Right. Right. And so here's the thing. We already have laws that remove people from the rolls if they should be removed. So if you die, they take you off the rolls because they get the death certificate. If you have moved, they get updates, right? So they can take you off. So we have a federal law and a process around that. But now what they're trying to do is make this monthly. Right. So because they want to keep getting people off the rolls very quickly before the midterms and the next election. So this is, and the other thing is we also have laws around voter fraud, right?
Yes.
With criminal laws, there's criminal penalties for voter fraud, right? And just think, if you are not a citizen of the United States, are you really trying to go up in there and vote? I mean, are you really trying to risk it all
People aren't,
to
because
have a
you're risking
say?
too much. That's the thing that is it's so
Right.
ridiculous, is you're not risking your potential path to citizenship
Right.
by showing up at a
That's right.
voting booth. One of the other things that feels particularly, I don't know, disingenuous about this. I mean, it's interesting because Senator Thune, I think yesterday or a couple days ago, was also saying the same thing that you just said, right? About, like, there are already laws on the books in states
Right.
to make sure that people who are not eligible to vote don't vote. And so there's something disingenuous about all of this, in that you have a Republican Party who knows all of this to not be true, to know that this is a bill in search of a problem or whatever. But these are also people who have said time and time again, and going back to the first Black president, that you can't make changes during an election year. You can't confirm someone to the Supreme Court in an election year, right? You can't,
Right.
right? They sort of go back and forth with the hypocrisy around what can and can't be done because it will affect an election.
Right.
And I
Right.
just think that, to me, and the fact that they very well know, I mean, it's not like there were no lawyers among them, right?
Right.
Aware of what this is.
Right. Well, so here's the thing, and also, like, redistricting, right? Like, let's
Yeah.
redistrict right before the election. So they say that, although they've tried it in all these states.
Well, but
Like,
also
state
let's redistrict in the states we want to redistrict in, but then let's
and
sue
not in the right.
California
Right.
for
Let's fight
redistricting.
them. Right. Because
Yeah.
they shouldn't be able to do it. Right. So this is like an unbalanced game. Right. And which is like, just shows what it's all about. Right.
Yes.
Like, it's just like,
Right.
they don't even care. They're like, yeah, that might seem hypocritical. And it is. But we don't care, because bottom line is we want to win.
Right.
And so, but that's not what our democracy is about, right? That's back to the free, fair, and accessible elections. And so I think this is nothing new. We've seen
Right.
state legislatures try and push things through last minute before elections. We run into court, we fight it. The courts sometimes say, yes, it's too close to an election, and sometimes they're like, go forth with it. So I actually think, like, we've got to fight this bill, because ultimately we should not have a show your papers election system. Because the thing is, also, people need to understand that it's not just, so when you register, a lot of Black people in particular register through voter registration drives.
Yes.
So sororities have it, community neighborhood groups have it, etc. So now you're going to have to give them, or give the state right after you registered, these extra documents. Like, it's just not tenable. Like, it's just not, logistically, it is impossible for this to happen. And really what they want is that they want to have a centralized system where people get registered centrally through the federal government, right?
Hmm.
Proving who you are, that we don't have voter registration drives, that nobody gets to do voter registration but them.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
That looks like pre 1965 Voting Rights Act. That's how it happened in the South, right? It was like
Right.
concentrated, no voter registration groups. You got to come through us so that we can give you a test to ask you how many bubbles are in a bar of soap, etc. So that's what they're trying to get back to.
Yeah. And we're not, and I think we're not going there. So what you said earlier, like, we need to
I'm
fight
not going
this.
there.
Right. And I think that and I think that's right. I mean, we hear folks around the country when we're talking to Black voters say, we need Democrats to fight, right? Like, they're
Yeah.
not fighting hard enough. We need them to stand up. We need them to have some backbone. Like, we hear all kinds of stuff from folks about the need for Democrats to fight. But I also think that we also have to remember that we are a part of the fight as well.
That's
And
right.
so one of the things that folks, if you have not already, and I know you folks have gotten the emails from us asking for you to please call your senator, regardless of who your senators are.
And whether you voted for them or not, I
Or
don't
whether you
care.
voted for them or not, and whether they are Republican or they are Democrats or independent, right? Call your senators and tell them that that they need to vote no, because this is an attack on our democracy. So people need to be in the fight. I also want to just say, Judith, that this idea that we have to prove who we are, or we have to prove who that we have a right to vote in this country, and I'm speaking about Black folks right now. I'm not. You don't get to talk to me. You don't get to talk to me about proving that I am a citizen, because again, too many people lay down their actual
Mhm.
lives
Right.
for Black people to have the right to vote. When we talk about how many generations has your family been in this country, kind of thing, like,
Mhm.
I don't have to prove anything. Go look
Right.
on the 1870 census. That's what you can
Right.
do, right? You don't get to ask me to prove that I have a right to vote, because our ancestors already proved that. They
Right.
already won that right. They already won that battle. We shouldn't have to
Yeah.
fight it again, but we do. And so that's the sort of the point. Like, we got to get in the fight just as generations before us have.
I think that's right, Adrian. Like, I don't want to have to prove anything. Like, my grandfather's from Charleston, South Carolina, and we had somebody in our family who was one of the first Black aldermen in South Carolina, in Charleston. And so I shouldn't have to prove anything. The rest of y'all should prove yourselves, because we don't know where your people came from. When they got up,
And you
when they
don't see
got off
that
that
either.
boat, they came up on that boat from Ellis Island, saw the Statue of Liberty, and didn't have to prove a thing. They didn't have no papers, no process, no nothing, right? So the rest of y'all should prove yourselves. But we've paid for this
Yeah,
over and over again,
right.
through generations,
Right.
and to think that we are still fighting for it. But I mean, this goes to show that, like, this white backlash and the desire to maintain power is going to be an ongoing struggle for us. Like, it's just, like, they're not giving up, right? And the closer that we get to the moment of tipping the demographic scales,
Yeah,
right? The worse the backlash gets,
that's
because
right.
they are afraid of losing their power. They're not afraid of us, but they're afraid of losing their power and their money.
Right. Well, there you go. The money, right? But I do wanna just connect this because I think that, again, I talked earlier about how sometimes it feels like we see these things in isolation. There's the SAVE Act 1, there's the SAVE Act 2, there's the Mega Act, right, which is out there in committee
Mm.
somewhere, that
Yeah,
all is about there's the, the current US president right now saying, "Add all this other stuff in. Take out
yeah,
mail-in voting,
yeah, yeah.
add in, discriminatory, actions against trans
Right,
people into a voting
right,
rights bill,
right.
or a voter suppression bill. Let me get my language straight. But this is all connected to,
Yep,
again, going back to Obama, the first wave of voter ID laws,
yep,
everything that we're seeing right now with the sort of lack of election integrity, the attempt to undermine elections. Um, it's all tied together. The redistricting, right?
right.
Or the attempts to redistrict that we're seeing. Talk a little bit about that and how
Yeah.
these things actually add up to something much more dangerous, for us as individuals, for our community, and also for the nation.
Yeah, so this has been a patchwork of voter suppression attempts and tactics, right? From voter ID, which really did spring up right after Obama was elected. I think like our first lawsuit when I was at Advancement Project was probably like 2010
Yeah.
around voter ID. And then we saw the spread of it all the way leading up to the 2012 election, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Then what happened was we saw many states, because of long lines, starting to do early voting,
Right.
pushing mail voting, right? Then the pandemic came and it was like, oh, we can do mail-in voting drop boxes.
Right.
And they saw who was using it, right? They were like, oh, hold on. And
Right.
said, okay, now we have to curb that, right? Oh, you all use drop boxes during the elections, which meant that it was doable and
Right.
we didn't have problems. And they said, no, that's you all are using that too much. What's interesting is in this
You're
bill, like
that's so crazy. I'm sorry, I don't mean to say, but, like, you're voting too much.
you're
We're gonna
voting too
need you to
much.
not do that.
Right. And there's new ones of you too. Like like
Right.
like you showing up, you bringing your family, you bringing your block, oh, you're arriving with five, all of that, all of
Right.
those programs that were very successful in turning out black vote, right? What, had to be curbed, right?
Right.
And then add to that, we have to think about this. So this is what we're seeing in the laws. Trump saying he's passing an executive order.
Yes.
Everybody needs to know
Yep.
he cannot change the way that we vote. That is left to the states and to Congress. His executive orders mean just about nothing.
Right.
And so him trying to, and then he's saying he wants to cut back on mail voting, which actually will hurt white people and Republican
Yes.
voters,
Mhm.
especially the elderly in Florida and places like that who
And
vote
and
by
and and
mail.
once again, Republicans in the Senate understand this, right?
Right,
Which
right.
is why
That's why they
this bill
can't
is
get the
strong.
votes.
Right,
That's why they
exactly.
can't get the votes. So, but the other thing that we have to add to that is that we see these laws changing, and at the same time, the courts
Mhm.
taking a blowtorch to the Voting Rights Act, right? So they're making it harder, the states making it harder to vote, the feds making it harder to vote, and the courts giving us no protections.
Right.
So that when we're ready to go fight on behalf of Black people everywhere around these laws, we don't have the same protection. So this is a perfect storm
Yeah.
around the hijacking of democracy. Like this,
Yeah.
like there's a case in the Supreme Court which may be the death knell of the Voting Rights Act, right? I mean, the states, the federal courts across the country have been chipping at it, making it harder for us to even bring lawsuits.
Right.
There's a whole area of the country where right now you cannot bring a case under the Voting Rights Act because they said that there's no private right of action, meaning that an individual or an organization cannot go into court to enforce the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
That
So
was some made
if
up
you
stuff. That wasn't the law for since 1965. People been bringing lawsuits, and then all of a sudden, the Eighth Circuit, which is like Missouri, one of
right.
those places, they say in Arkansas, you can't bring lawsuits any longer.
Right.
So, and now, so this case,
See what that means? It means that if I am discriminated against, if my vote has
yeah,
been denied to me, that I
right,
can go to the Advancement Project, the Legal
yeah,
Defense Fund, the NAACP, and say,
yeah,
"Hey, these people are discriminating against me. Help
right.
me
That's right.
file a lawsuit."
Help me file a lawsuit. Right. And it could be that it's the state passed a law
Right.
that is discriminatory
Right.
and hits Black people more than it hits white people, right? You go, you ask for somebody to represent you in that particular circuit, the Eighth Circuit. You cannot bring that lawsuit.
Right.
You as an individual, nor like the NAACP, for example, is always a plaintiff in these lawsuits, right?
Yes.
To sue on behalf of its members and other Black people. They
Hmm.
cannot go into court in that circuit right now.
Right.
And that was just made up. Like literally, like
Right.
how do you like we've been bringing these cases since forever, right?
Right.
And now all of a sudden you can't bring it. So, but what's in the Supreme Court really is like the
Yeah.
last dagger to the Voting Rights
Right.
Act. And so we'll see what happens. But we also know that we have a Supreme Court that is tilted and
Yes.
that we have a Chief Justice who never liked the Voting Rights Act.
Whose entire
And
career
so
has been based on destroying it.
right. And so this is the thing is that so we're seeing the state laws, the federal courts all coming together to restrict the vote,
Yeah.
to make it harder to vote and to take away our protections when we are harmed and when it's taken from us.
Yeah.
And, but we're also, the highlights of this is that we're also seeing some states passing their own voting rights acts, right? And so
Mhm.
that there are some protections. So I know like we worked when I was at Advancement Project on Virginia, which is the first state in the South to have a voting rights act. People are pushing for one in Maryland, where I live right now.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so that we readapt, right? And we have to figure out ways to make sure that we are protected.
Yeah.
But this is like the fight for our democracy, and they want it, and they're playing hardball.
They're playing hardball, although I will take our track record as a people any
Yes.
day over
Oh,
anybody else's because
of course.
we do not lose.
No.
And when we get in the fight, when we get focused, when people get clear, and I think that that's part
Right.
of what is happening right now as we prepare for the midterm elections, as people continue to resist in different ways, right? The authoritarianism that we're seeing people, coming to clarity about what
Right.
role they can play.
Right. And you say, I mean, and we see it in all the people who are being elected, who
That's right.
actually like are addressing our needs, right? Like we are voting and we are getting people who actually represent the needs of the Black community in office. And so
Yes.
they're there to fight for us, and we have to keep pushing them. Don't ignore them now. We gotta keep
Right,
pushing them,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But
Accountability,
like
accountability, yes.
right, but that shows, and the thing is that the other side knows. They see
Yeah,
it. They see the
yeah,
wave happening,
yeah,
and they are like, "Uh-oh, it is coming. It is
yeah.
coming." And so that's why they're doing this, because we're actually winning. And and we also know that like winning is not easy,
Mhm.
and that it takes us, keeping our foot on the pedal. You can't just like walk away from it and think that we're going to be okay. And that means that these midterms clearly, like I always think, like if they're fighting this hard, they
Yeah,
know how
yeah,
important this midterm is,
yeah,
and they know that he is not doing well, and that they see these primaries where their MAGA people are losing,
yeah.
and they are trying to set it up so to change the rules so
Mhm.
that they can win. I was liking it to like an Uno game. You know how you get down to that last card, you
Yes.
get down to the last two cards, and your family decides that there's a new rule, no rule, new rule. Just when you about to go out. Just when you about to
Yeah,
go out. That's what it is. They playing Uno
that
with mean rules.
that is hilarious.
Maybe your family doesn't cheat like mine does, but okay.
I've been so funny because I saw someone else talking about this, the reverse Uno card. Um, so one of the other things about the midterm, and I wanted just to reiterate your point about why they're fighting so hard, right? Because I think that that's also,
Yeah.
something that people should take note of. And attempting to pass legislation, whether it's at the federal level, the state level, they can just wipe things out completely, right? In one sort of
Right.
one fell swoop. And so we know what happened with the redistricting efforts, which many have failed. I mean, Texas did their thing, but many other Republican legislatures were like, no, we're not doing that. But the Supreme Court decision, the Calais decision, I also just always want to make note of this, that when that decision comes down, not if, but when that decision comes down, it could launch. I always say all of the Confederate states will redraw their congressional lines. So the thing that you
Yeah.
raised, which is so important about, like, we have record numbers of Black people serving in Congress right now. And
Right.
again, we might
Right.
not like them all, and we definitely need to hold people accountable and elect people that, make sure we have people in there that we want. But can you imagine that this decision comes down and before November, the Confederate states redraw their lines, eliminating every Black member of Congress in those states? That is the
Yes.
stakes that
Right.
we're talking about right
Right.
now.
Right. Right. Yes, it would open up the floodgates
Yeah.
to redistricting everywhere, and not just like at the federal level, right?
Yes.
State
Yeah.
legislatures,
Yeah.
everything will be open because it'll be like there's no holds bars. Is that what they say? Like there's no rules, there's no way to protect Black people,
Yeah.
Latino people, so that would be, yeah, there would be a definite power grab. I mean, the one thing I would say is that would happen. All of this is about timing also, depending
Yes.
on when that decision comes down, right? Because the closer you get to an election, real valid arguments could be made that we cannot redraw these lines in time and actually run an election
Right.
with these new districts, right? But that means that it'll be ready for the presidential, right? And for whatever that year for congressional runs and et
Yeah.
cetera in between. So
Yeah.
that's the one thing. And in the past, like, these voting rights cases have been literally issued the orders on like the last day of the term, which
Yep.
is in June.
Yep.
But I would suspect that this court knows that time's a ticking, like, you get it done.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. We'll see. But I think they will be hell bent to actually get this done and get new districts in place for this election. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing. It might be a momentary saving grace,
Right.
because at the end of the day, it will mean that there's no Voting Rights Act left.
Yeah, so that's the stakes. That's what we're facing. This Save America Act that saves no one from nothing is in the Senate. They're
Well,
they
it saves white supremacy.
Well,
I mean,
it does save white supremacy. That is a
yeah,
fact.
yeah,
It is being debated in the Senate right now and will be for the next several days. The debate over saving white supremacy is
yeah,
being debated in the United States Senate right now.
yeah,
Everyone has an opportunity to call your senators and tell them absolutely not, that they need to hold the line, that they need to say no, that this is an attack on not just our democracy overall, but our individual rights as
right.
citizens in this country. And so let them know. I'm gonna give you the last word here as we wrap up, while I try and find the switchboard for the Capitol.
I mean, at the end of the day, we just got it. We have to be vigilant. We have to turn out in these midterms. We have to make these calls right now, and understand and be telling other people, because people who are listening to this or watching or whatever you're doing, like, that means y'all know something that some other people don't know. So you
Right.
need to share the information. Just don't sit on it, but raise the alarm, with your family and friends, so that they understand what is going on and what is at stake.
Okay, you want to call your senator. You call the switchboard, the congressional switchboard, 202-224-3121. Call your senators at 202-224-3121 and tell them to vote no on the SAVE Act. And pay attention to what folks are saying. Judith was reminded us that these folks are telling us everything that we need to know out loud and in public. So pay attention to what folks are saying, because they're giving away the game, and it'll give you an opportunity to know what you need to do to make sure that you are in this fight with the rest of this community. Thank you, Judith. I appreciate
Thank
you
you.
for coming on and breaking
Thank
it down with
you. Thanks for having me.